Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship, where we love you enough to tell you the truth. On this program, we will be studying Romans chapter 8, verses 9 through 18. We will be discussing the glorious promise to believers, a mystery that Paul reveals here and in Colossians 1, of Christ in you, the hope of glory. We now join our study of the Authorized King James Version in progress. So we've studied in Romans chapter 8, the first 8 verses, and emphasized the necessity of walking in the Spirit as opposed to walking in the flesh as a Christian. As a Christian, we have to die daily, Paul said. We don't just get zapped with some supernatural power to overcome everything without obeying the Lord in our daily lives of reading the Word, praying, witnessing, and desiring to live a life that's pleasing to the Lord. And that's why when you see somebody get religious but not get born again, you will, in a matter of time, they'll be able to play the part, but they'll eventually fall flat on their face. Because that's why Jesus said you must be born again. That which is born of the flesh is flesh. That which is born of the Spirit is spirit. That was the Pharisees. They had a lot of religion. They put on the show. People looked at them and thought, oh, look how godly. But they didn't have the Spirit of God in them. So when the Messiah Himself shows up, they reject Him. If the Pharisees had the Spirit, and some of them did, Nicodemus, for example, he was under the influence of the Spirit of God and he recognized Jesus. Joseph of Arimathea was a leader in the community who had the Spirit of God on him during that. He was still in the Old Covenant, but because of the influence of the Spirit of God, he recognized the Messiah and gave that tomb that he had for his family that had never been used, and he donated it to the cause. And so in verse 9, Mike, if you'll start us by reading there, we continue to expand on this understanding of the necessity of being born again and having the Spirit of God in us.
But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of us.
Or none of his. Yeah.
His.
Yeah. Not of us. Well, he's not of us as believers either. But if you're a Christian, you're not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. Meaning that as a Christian, there is no reason for us to ever walk in the flesh. We have the Spirit of God in us. You know, you realize, I know it's easier said than done, but all you have to do is surrender. Just don't fight God. That's all. Our problem is we fight God. We wake up in the morning and immediately, if we don't obey the Word which says to wake up singing, wake up in prayer, the Bible says that on my bed I will sing praises unto you in the book of Psalms. From the very beginning, the first thing you wake up in the morning, I know this isn't easy, and I have to struggle with this daily. But when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should think isn't, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. That is, many times, the first thought that comes in my head. And my excuse is, I'm still not awake yet. Once I get awake, I get more spiritual. No, but seriously, when you wake up, it is hard to control what's going through your mind. You know, I've woken up in the morning and I thought, pickles. You know, just, you're not really there. Well, when you do kind of come to your consciousness of being awake, then train yourself to think, this is another day for me to love and serve the Lord. I mean, if you can get, you don't have to think there's I'm not going to, make that a catchphrase and start selling books and, that kind of thing. Wake up with God, that kind of thing. But that wouldn't be a bad gimmick because that's what we ought to do. And then from that time in the morning, as you walk through your day, always be asking yourself, what should I be doing right now? What could I be doing right now? I mean, you have a lull in the, if you work the phones, you have a lull in the amount of time you're working on the phones. Ask yourself, what you could pray. Or you could answer an email and be an encouragement to somebody, or challenge somebody, as the case is. But you're led by the Spirit. Those are the kind of things you ask yourself. We have had a conversation when we've talked about prayer before that my prayer life was hindered by a radio preacher. I'm not going to name names. This guy's not a bad guy or anything, but he was teaching on prayer. And he said that it was a disrespectful, horrible thing to fall asleep praying. How would you feel if someone fell asleep? And I thought, this is a big guy, so I'm thinking, wow, I've been doing that. I should stop. So I actually stopped praying at night for fear I'd fall asleep. Later on, as I matured, and I had babies. And I had little Mariah, who loved to talk when she's a baby. I mean, we got video of Mariah just sitting on the couch just going, she's not speaking English yet. But she's talking. And I've got my mom and dad, they filmed her, and they're just sitting there going, really? Oh, yeah? And Mariah's just looking at him as serious to me. And it wasn't in tongues, so it was just baby talk. And as I matured in my walk with the Lord, and I'm holding my little baby there, and she's talking, and I'm telling you, this happened so many times. She's just looking at me, and she's go cross-eyed, and then, and be still talking. And I thought, there's nothing more precious in the world to a father than to have his child go to sleep talking to him. And that's when I threw that whole idea out the window. Now, it's one thing if you've gone the entire day without praying, and then as you're falling asleep, oh yeah, dear Lord, that's not what but if you've gone through your day with an attitude of prayer, and you end your day in prayer, and you fall asleep in the middle of that prayer, God is not going to strike you. I think He sees that just as precious as we have when we've been holding little babies and they've been talking to us and falling asleep. And if you have the Spirit of God dwelling in you, that's the kind of day you can live from morning to night, from the time from afternoon to morning, according to what your schedule is, whenever you wake up to the time you go to sleep.
And wake up again.
And wake up again. And that's another thing. I mean, Jenny, we've talked about how many times God just wakes us up in the middle of the night with somebody on our minds. Well, the devil didn't put that person on your mind, so that you got to kind of figure that maybe God's put him on your mind and wants you to pray for that person. And then if you fall asleep praying for him, that's better than taking sleeping pills. Let God put you to sleep in prayer. So now we continue knowing that if we have the Spirit of God in us, we belong to Him. If we don't, then we don't. That's profound, isn't it? But that's the way it is. Read verses 10 through 11, Mike.
And if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of Him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, He that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by His Spirit that dwelleth in you.
You see that key there? Not only to you living the Christian life, but the key to you being raised and going to heaven. Raised if you die before the rapture, be resurrected, or in the rapture when the voice of the archangel and the trump of God sounds. What is going to cause you to go up? It's not the same, but it's comparable to God having this giant magnet in the sky, and when He flicks that button,